Hey everybody, what's up? Somebody at DeviantArt called Bleeding Fingertips asked me to talk about this, and I briefly talked about it in an audio video. But I think trying to think, I think he wants me to answer the question. Let me check my notes here. But I think he wants to know basically, I think what he wants to know, and again, let me check my notes here real quickly. Bleeding Fingertips basically wants to know if Ian Flynn even acknowledges or even wants to acknowledge a certain pairing that the fans have created. Let me check my notes here for a second, and I'll try to tell you what it is. They've asked me to do. I think this is like the second time they've asked me to do this. Here it is. They also want me to do an article on it, so I just might do that too. They asked me perhaps I could write an article and a video about the rise of Tails and Nicole and about Tails and Nicole pairing and how Ian is trying to ignore it. The club and couple is currently the fastest growing, and fans have voiced their support many times. However, Ian wishes to ignore these and try and pair up Nicole with characters people don't really want her with, such as SBO or Rotor. Okay. Well, basically, I don't think Ian's ignoring it, honestly. And the truth is, I think Ian's more of a realist in a way. When you take a look at the current storyline right now, he's trying to make it as real and as believable as he can. He's trying to get people to really get emotionally invested in it and want more out of it. So to me, I think trying to be real in some areas, he just doesn't. I'm not saying this is exactly how Ian looks at it, but I don't think the reason Ian may be ignoring it, maybe not acknowledging it, as some people wish he should, is I think it's more along the lines of, Tails in the story is kind of like 12, 13 years old, and the way Nicole is, she's basically portrayed to be about, in her physical Mobian form, about the same age as Sally, maybe a year or so younger. And I think that's why he doesn't acknowledge it. Now I know some people who would agree with Bleeding Fingertips would say, well, she has the ability to make herself a little younger, maybe about the same age as Tails. That's true. That is true, but being, I guess, the realist that he is, it's more or less the fact that he wants to look at it from a reality standpoint. You know, it's like, basically it's kind of like it's like he looks at some of these celebrity couplings, right? These celebrity pairings, and he's probably one of those people that ask the question of why would a lady that's in her 40s or her 50s go for a guy that's in their 30s or their 20s? Or why would a lady in her 30s and 40s go after somebody in their 20s and their late teens? Things like that. Or such and such. Or like, why would a young lady in her 40s or 50s go after a guy that's in his 70s or 80s? You get what I'm saying? Basically, that's just my personal humble opinion. I think that is why he doesn't acknowledge, in the eyes of some, this pairing. And that is why maybe in the eyes of some, like, say, Bleeding Fingertips, he basically, I guess as Bleeding Fingertips looks at it, is trying to pair her up with SBO or Rotor. Because in a realistic standpoint, it makes more sense. But obviously, from what Bleeding Fingertips is saying, the Tails Nicole pairing, the club, the group, this fan support for it is rapidly growing, and it's growing at a point that I guess in their opinion and maybe some others share the same opinion, that, Ian Flynn needs to acknowledge it and say, you know what, maybe I could try to make this work. Because again, like I said, Nicole being an AI, and that's probably another reason too, but being an AI can physically make herself the same age as Tails in some ways, maybe not. We're not really sure. Um, but again, I don't think it's the fact that he's ignoring it just because he doesn't want to acknowledge it. I think it's more or less the fact that he's a realist. And being a realist, you've got to, uh, you basically got to look at it like this. From a realistic standpoint, it doesn't make sense. Now, believe me when I say this. I know some people will watch this and say, well, Brian, there is reality behind what all those examples you just mentioned. Yes, there is. As a matter of fact, I'll give you an even better example. When I was in high school, I had some classmates of mine, friends, who had relationships with people older than them. There was one girl that there was about one or two girls that had relationships with guys that were seniors. They were freshmen, but they had relationships with guys that were seniors. And, vice versa. So I can understand that age difference sometimes when it comes to love, especially if it's not too far apart in age, but very close and similar, isn't a bad thing. I can understand that. But I think it's more along the lines of, you want to be real. When it comes to a story, you want to be real. It's like if you were to have Jubilee in X-Men fall in love with Scott Summers. You get what I'm saying? Or if you were to have the Rogue that's portrayed in the X-Men movies and somewhat in the X-Men cartoons later on, like say Evolution, falling in love with the Wolverine, in those movies. It doesn't make sense. It's not real. So I'm thinking, just my honest, humble opinion, I know I'm repeating myself saying that, but I think this is why Ian doesn't initially want to probably go in that direction. And another is the fact that she's an AI, and even though she's become more real and more emotionally, humanoid, if you will, the fact is it's more or less along the lines of it wouldn't make sense in a realistic standpoint. I mean, he's more acceptable. I think he said this once maybe. I'm not really sure. I could be wrong, but I think he's more acceptable of Tails and Amy than maybe he would be of Tails and Nicole. But again, I can't say whether or not he knows of the group, and if he does, he's ignoring it on purpose. I can't say that. But honestly, if he does know and he does realize the group, as Bleeding Fingertips puts it, is growing at a rapid pace, and the support for the parent is growing at a rapid pace, maybe one day he'll acknowledge it, but I'm not really sure. So that's just my thoughts on it. Bleeding Fingertips requested I talk about it a little bit. I'll probably type up an article in a little bit about it, but again, I just think it's more or less aligned. He wants to make it as realistic as he can in some areas. So comment down below. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you agree with Bleeding Fingertips, and I will talk to you all later.